Now we're going to move on to roughly 1 hour of things that we disagree on. Being cognizant again of the fact that you had roughly this something like this debate last year and have talked about this at much length. We are again going to do the thing where we assume that you have roughly understood the core concepts of AI 2027 and of AI as a normal technology. If you haven't, you'll be jumping in 50% of the way through. I'm roughly sorry, but I just don't want to have the same debate again. So we're just going to try and skip all of the normal things. If you start to say something that is already explained in your book or paper, I will stop you and just say, assume that knowledge, let's continue, so that we don't have these same debates again. Um, so I think maybe the core distinction that I think we can start with is just this takeoff point. I think this is like the main sort of disagreement. The thing that I would like to ideally have at some point is, if we can find it through at some point through this debate, a thing that you disagree on before that. I think this would be my favorite thing, because this would help distinguish these two worlds. And so I would like to at some point try and find this. I don't know if we can, but let's start just with the takeoff point itself, and then we can maybe work forwards and backwards from there. So I don't know. Do you want to briefly just describe the why is the takeoff going to happen in a way that hopefully can try and refute something that Sayash is going to say that is not just already described in AI 2027?
So part of me wants to do this thing where I try to like paint the picture as I think Sayash sees it, and then see if you agree. A different thing I could do is just sort of jump ahead and be like, suppose you have fully automated AI R&D. Now let's try to estimate how much faster the AI R&D process goes. I'm happy to do either. Which are you more interested in starting with?
I mean, I guess we could start with the first one.
I mean, it sounded like earlier you also just disagree about will we, like, in the next 50 years, see fully automated AI R&D in the sense of if you eliminated the human employees, things would slow down by less than 5%. So, I mean, it does seem like that there is just definitely a disagreement by that point. Like, if we're just seeing, like, turns out that OpenAI's employees are no longer relevant, you're like, whoa, what the fuck happened? Is that right?
Um, yeah, or like something like OpenAI's employees. So like for the next 50 years or the foreseeable future for me, like humans continue to play a strong role in
Yeah.
improving AI models and other types of
A-
technical
And
advancements.
similarly, I would be quite surprised if the following happens. And this is what I think you expect. So let's just interrupt me if at any point I say something that's like not roughly what you would expect. Let's see how this goes. Okay, so the year is 2029. Some people are saying that coding has been automated. Sayash is saying that really the programmers have just switched to different aspects of the coding job. They're managing teams of AI agents that are, you know, doing all this complicated writing and debugging, but like the human is still very important in terms of like specifying the shape of the code that needs to be written, and also like interfacing with the higher level research goals of the organization. AI is in 2029 still can't, generate um, new paradigm shifts anywhere near reliably. It's still humans who are doing, that sort of like cognitive work. And that's where the bottleneck is right now. Also, of course, compute, you still have compute. Okay, now fast forward to like 2035. Some kinds of new paradigms have been discovered by AIs, but like um we've exhausted those kinds. And like there's this other kind of, moving beyond that is something that still we need human scientists to think about and to do the experiments for. And moving on to 2045, basically like there's going to be this long slow slog of like we automate this aspect of the research process, but the AIs, while very impressive, like still can't do this other very important aspect. And so the humans sort of switch to doing that other aspect. And then maybe in like 2050 or 2100 or so, finally we get to that sort of robo Australia situation. Is that what you expect?
I mean, so maybe I can add a little bit of color to all three. So in 2029, I guess, sure, like a lot of the relevant like code for conducting experiments or building applications and so on is written by AI. At the same time, there is an increasing bifurcation. Like the term software engineer does not even mean one thing anymore. You have people who can interface with sort of AI programming languages and manage coding agents, like you said. But then there are still people who are sort of writing sort of the low level language to make sure that the infrastructure runs smoothly, that there are no bugs. And humans still have like a big role to play in verifying and controlling systems to make sure there aren't reliability failures, that AI systems sort of don't introduce catastrophic bugs. We might have seen a few of these, and AI companies and all other companies have adjusted to sort of adopt their software engineering practices. In 2035, when these new paradigms are coming in, yeah, I think like a lot of it could be driven by primarily by AI systems, with humans just specifying what these things look like. I guess I don't know if in this world scientific progress is faster or slower. So, as one concrete example, over the last I don't know, like 100 or 150 years, we have had a doubling pace of the number of papers written. It doubles every 12 years. But by most metrics of transformative impact, the transformative breakthroughs we make are roughly constant. In other words, despite the increasing outputs, we are not able to improve outcomes. And so, in some sense, we might have like localized effects on new paradigms. We might come up with more and more impressive versions of AlphaFold. We might have like much more mathematics being written. But at the same time, we might not have made progress in a large number of domains. And broadly speaking, scientific progress either remains at the same pace or slows down. So that won't be sort of
Okay, so then why is that? Why do you think that's wrong? Like, what's your?
So I think that that's how things will look until some point when you're fully automating AI R&D. Why do I think that that point will come relatively soon? Let me give an example. Suppose that you got, suppose that you made progress in data efficiency and or online learning to the point where you had AI systems that were as good as humans or perhaps even somewhat better in those metrics. Then,
Can you spell that out a bit more? Like, what do you mean when they're as good as humans at online learning? Say what you mean by that.
well, what I mean in this particular, for this particular argument, what I need to mean is that, when you've automated some aspect of the current R&D process, normally what happens is you've only automated that aspect, but not the other aspects. And so the humans switch to that other aspect. And sometimes even when you automate the whole thing, then humans find some other new way to contribute, right? But how does that work? Well, the humans are this flexible learning thing. And so they like learn how to do the new thing that's providing value. And at some point, we'll have AIs that are flexible learning things too, that can learn how to do the new thing.
So do you disagree with that?
Humans.
So I disagree that we know how to get there, or that current settings or current techniques will get us anywhere close
Right.
to there. And I don't think this will happen like in the foreseeable future.
So
This is
conditioned on that.
So conditioned on developing humans that we can run on the cloud, I guess like humans that we can run on the cloud is a not normal technology.
Yeah, conditioned on that,
sweet.
and then exponential things happen.
Can we high five? I feel like we just made huge progress. Like, I think that's basically the crux. Like, I also would agree that like if we don't have data efficiency, basically, if we don't have online learning, if we don't have those things that currently our current paradigm lacks, then we're probably not going to get to full automation of AI R&D, because it'll probably still be the case that like it'll be this slow grind, right? Like right now they're creating these huge RL environments, making these big training runs, and then they get this LLM that can do these types of tasks, but it can't do other types of tasks, and they need to like make new environments to train those types of things. As long as we're still doing that sort of slow grind, we haven't fully automated AI R&D yet, I would say.
I guess one other thing I'll add is at the beginning of each paradigm, or when you're in the middle of one paradigm, it's very hard to imagine what the bottlenecks to the next one are. So, for example, for the longest time, I guess lots of people assumed that the tasks that today's models can do would be as hard as getting to like this type of AGI, as hard as running humans on the cloud. And yet we've been able to overcome all of these barriers without actually getting to that point. So maybe data efficiency is not one of those things. Maybe we get to a point where we have sample efficient algorithms, but they only work on a certain subset of things, like they do today for like the tasks that they've been trained on, for instance.
Yeah, definitely. I think Daniel means like sample efficient on everything, at least
Yeah.
everything that
Everything
involves-
relevant in AI R&D, at least.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, yeah, I think that maybe we could think of this as a timelines disagreement then, where like it seems to me at the current pace of progress that the types of algorithmic breakthroughs or whatever needed to get this sort of thing going are not that far away.
So how like do you believe there are breakthroughs that need to be made, or like just like pure scaling LLMs plus current reasoning stuff is enough? Or
It depends on what you mean by like what counts as a breakthrough, Let me describe what happens. Wait, I can't describe what happens in AI 2027. If you'll indulge me for a little moment, I'll say what happens in AI 2027. It's a mix. So in AI 2027, there's this period of like within paradigm progress where they're iterating on data efficiency within the current paradigm, and they're iterating on online learning by like coming up with ways to be sort of like continually fine tuning and stuff. But then sort of like midway through 2027, they just have like completely new architectures that are inspired by the human brain that like do something more similar to what the brain is doing. And that's kind of what I expect. I expect it to be a period of like incremental progress towards these metrics. But then at some point, either it transitions abruptly or just sort of smoothly into newer paradigms that have been discovered along the way.
Maybe one other point of disagreement here is, can we basically just do this in silico, or are there bottlenecks external to the world? And I think like there would be these bottlenecks that not because of anything we can do at the level of AI, but simply because of how the world operates, we cannot get past simply within the AI labs. So for this current paradigm, it was like building training environments and collecting this expert level, like training data sets and so on. And in my view, there are sort of unforeseen and as yet unknown breakthroughs that might have this dependency on, and probably will have this dependency on the real world that we can't even foresee yet simply because we are not in those paradigms.
So suppose that we had like human on the cloud, like, that sort of thing. Do you agree that from that point, there isn't much external dependence in the outside world for things to go really
I
crazy?
think you have these speed limits, right? Like you write down.
Exactly. And so, like, first of all, yeah, human in the cloud, not normal technology. This is not something I think about a lot. But second, like, even for many kinds of progress, there would still be dependencies on the real world. For example, like we could develop or come up with designs for drugs that work pretty well, but we would still need to do these RCTs to try to figure out whether these drugs actually work on real humans. Or we could come up with some new thing that requires interaction with the real world that we still need to sort of run expensive trials for or expensive experiments on, or make real world infrastructure to make happen.
But I don't think you need to do that to automate AI R&D, right? Like you could have it could still be true that you need to do human trials in order to make better medicine, and yet you could still like I don't think this is necessarily a disagreement.
Yeah, in 2027, they automate the AI R&D, they get the super intelligence that are like humans in the cloud, except even better. But they still don't know how to like make drugs exactly, and they need to like go out into the economy, and that happens in 2028 in the story, right? Yeah.
But I think there is a disagreement here, which is like there are some view like I guess I would describe this as like humans in the cloud to like wildly super intelligent, crazy fucking shit in the cloud, and then like that stuff like can very quickly revolutionize the economy and do all kinds of crazy stuff and take over the world and whatever. And that indeed is bottlenecked by the real world, but like bottlenecked some, but it's still going to happen extremely fast because the limits on how fast things can happen, especially if you're pursuing every route in parallel with vast amounts of cognitive labor, is very high.
So like suppose we had like country of geniuses in a data center kind of thing, right? Like
Country of humans in the cloud,
sure,
who are geniuses.
okay, like your view is like compute constraints. We'll still gonna have to manufacture stuff. Like there are some speed limits here, or like conditional on that. Like it's just like immediately it's exponential, like Daniel wants.
Yeah, I think there'll be like a lot of constraints on all the real world stuff. So what I expect will happen is maybe like setting aside the humans in the cloud for a minute, we'll have extremely advanced models that can do really impressive things. And the cost of doing those things sort of drops right that moment or like very soon afterwards. And we sort of should
Other new things.
exactly to new things that these models can't yet do. So and so like Daniel,
But but what are the new things that the humans in the cloud can't do?
yeah. So I guess no, but my question is like
Before he said something aside humans.
Okay.
so like my question is, if we end up with architectures that are not like fully humans in the cloud, but things that have like maybe 95% of the cognitive capabilities, do you agree that we would still be bottlenecked on the 5% or whatever? And like
Yes.
society would basically be normal.
Well,
Yes, except like I think that if you do 95%, then even though you're bottled on the 5%, things are probably still going faster than they were today.
Do you think that's going 20x faster because
Not 20x faster because of like diminishing blah blah blah.
Sure.
We're trying to model this. We at Air Futures Project are like attempting to construct a model of how this works. Obviously, models are probably wrong. Blah 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 blah. But like, I'll trust what the model says more than anything else I pull out of my. Yeah. So, but so I'd say like when you've automated 95% of the tasks that they're currently doing, things will be going like less than 20 times faster than they currently are, but like more than 2 times faster or something, and then that feeds into my timelines views where, new paradigms don't come along every year, obviously, but they come along like every decade. And so if you're going like 10 times faster, well, maybe you should be expecting a new paradigm in the next year. That's kind of where I'm at with this.
Interesting. And like maybe to sort of put this more concretely, I don't know, OpenAI has maybe 4x or 6x the number of AI researchers as Anthropic. Do you think progress at OpenAI is 6x faster?
Hell no. I think that parallel researchers matter relatively little.
So why would you expect like the human in the cloud paradigm to radically change
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
Also.
that's
We could talk
surprising.
about maybe we should talk about like what is the production function for AI progress, and I can like we could break that down into terms and then try to like be like what's our shitty mathematical function here, and then from there I think it does actually predict I think it like makes reasonable predictions and also predicts that you would get large progress speed ups at various points. Maybe I could go through that.
So it'll be like
we-
so you don't think that the parallelism is important. So if you put 1,000 humans in the cloud, whatever, you think this is similar to 1,000,000?
So we attempt to model this in our model, and also we had a much worse model in AI 2027, which you can just go read. So we tried to like estimate the effects of these different things. When you have AIs that can do stuff, you'll have, in some sense, that's like having more labor, more parallel labor. But importantly, it's also more serial labor because they literally get things done faster than an individual human.
Okay, so you think of like primarily like the fact that you could run
The serial speed up is way more important, in my opinion, than the parallelism. And then in addition to that, there's also the quality. So right now, there isn't much like the humans that just do things that generally at higher quality than the AIs. But like at some point in the future, the AIs will be doing things with higher quality than the humans. And I think that this is another disagreement. Like, think about OpenAI versus Anthropic versus DeepMind versus Meta versus all these other companies. Like, it's common for a small, focused group of hardcore individuals to outcompete a much larger, well-resourced company that has 10 times as many, 100 times as many people, 100 times as many compute. Why is that common? Well, because quality matters. The serial speed difference is the same between the small startup and the large company, and the parallel difference favors the large company. So it has to be quality that accounts for the difference, right?
So there's
And like right now, the AIs don't have a quality advantage, but like gradually at some point in the future, they will, and they'll be able to just actually make more progress for a given like unit of thought than humans.
so there's this famous figure that has like the ability of like apes, and then the village idiot, and then Einstein, and then in your book you put the like that's the wrong thing. It's about like ability to impact the environment. I forget if it's your book or your paper, one of the two. I guess you dispute this view of like that the quality is going to go much higher.
Or like, I guess in some sense, like the quality, I mean, I don't even think of humans as a comparison point in some sense for a lot of these questions, because when we develop tools, we actually do get like not just like 2 times or 5 times better than humans, but like hundreds of times better at like, I don't know, multiplying long digit numbers or like carrying out many tasks. And so we shouldn't just expect, like cognitive capabilities to be like some limiting factor for some set of tasks. But as we develop that tool to sort of carry out this computational task, we get like hundreds of times better. And the consequence of that is not that this AI system becomes autonomous, though. The consequence is we use this tool to conduct better AI research. So that's what I think sort of happens in the corollary view. Like we conduct like a lot better AI research, and then the bottleneck just shifts to being able to conduct experiments, for example, because no matter how much serial compute you get, like you're still bottlenecked on the number of H100s or the ability to test things with the real world or get feedback from real users. Because once again, doesn't matter how many sort of geniuses in a data center you have, if you will.
Well, it sounds like to me like there's sort of two different regimes that are worth talking about. There's like the AIs. They're actually just better than the humans at fucking everything. Like, no 5% left. No, everything. And then I'm like, they're not like speeding up some of the stuff. The humans are doing some of the stuff. And then we could talk about that regime. Sounds like the disagreement there is just like, how far away are we from that? And then there's like, how much acceleration can you get at earlier points from partial automation? And maybe there's like a quantitative disagreement, but it sounds to me like the bigger disagreement is like, if we even didn't have any acceleration and we just had sort of the march of AI progress, how far are we from like the AIs can do everything, humans in a cloud? That feels like the big
Right, I agree. This feels. I mean, so in the other one of the other books, in Eliezer's book, he sort of writes at some point, he doesn't know how many steps are necessary to get to the point that the models can do this thing. It may take years, it may take decades, but like eventually it will happen, and then everyone dies. But like, so he has this like, I don't know what it takes, but like, conditional on that, this is what happens afterwards. I mean, it seems like you're like much more aggressive on the like, not eventually, but like, very, very soon the things will happen, and maybe not everyone dies, but like you sort of are like much more aggressive on the other side.
That's right. I have shorter timelines than it seems like most other people do. And to be clear, I'm not confident. Like, it's not like I think definitely, like I could also imagine it taking more decades.
It's not like, 99%, but like, you would put like, at least 70% probability mass in your mind, on like the next, 10 years.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess like this is one of the main cruxes, because I think like as we sort of get to these next levels, it becomes harder to sort of think about what the next paradigms are, and we sort of have to spend more time breaking through. And at the same time, as we are improving these AI technologies, in my view, like we also build in the defenses for this like certain level of capabilities. So maybe I guess one point where I don't know if you would agree, but certainly if we have like decades of slower build up to this point where we have something resembling, maybe not even there, but resembling humans in the cloud, in this extremely slow world, do you think this gives you enough time to build up defenses and to sort of control the technology, figure out how to govern it and so on? Okay.
I would have said it helps a lot, but a lot of what matters is also what happens after you have humans in the cloud. So I think I would be like, there's like build up to humans in the cloud, and then from humans in the cloud to like crazily superhuman humans in the cloud. And if we're going like, oh yeah, we have humans in the cloud, and then a year later we have crazily superhuman, humans in the cloud, then I don't feel so good. If it's like, oh no, the whole progression just all the way through is gradual, then I feel much better.
Okay, so let's try and shift away a little bit from the specific takeoff singularity sort of point thing, and make some other discussions around like maybe before this happens or something like this. One of I think the big disagreements that you often have is around the additional thing that can happen because you have access to these models. So like in your book, you write. In our view, the additional risk posed by these abilities, like by models, is minimal, and the kinds of dangerous information, for example, through bioweapons or something, was already available. Like you're not actually meaningfully, the models themselves are not contributing anything harmful. So you wrote this maybe a year and a half ago or something. Do you still believe it's true first?
I mean, largely yes, especially for the current generation of models.
Do you believe it will be true for like the models that we have in 2 years? Like, will it be the case? So in 2 years, will it be the case that a model will like sort of meaningfully uplift people at like producing bioweapons?
I mean, so one thing I would want to point out is like the estimate here, like would a model meaningfully enable uplift, is not just dependent on the model's capabilities, but also like what societal defense mechanisms are in place.
Can we say without
Yeah,
defense?
so assume without that, just like
Let's say like, can we be like, let's be concrete, like humans are now like let's say smallpox manufacturing uplift, like with the current, like if you sort of took the AIs from 2 years from now, they were totally unsafeguarded, and we like fine-tuned them to help people with bioweapons, they would be very helpful for amateurs making smallpox using like the current DNA synthesis machinery, etc.
And like in this view, like these individuals have unrestricted access to DNA synthesis.
yeah, but put
The current access, which I would say is, at least as of right now, pretty close to unrestricted.
not put me, someone who has never taken a class in biology, like in sort of a wet lab that I could probably get into today because like I'm sort of like a reasonable person.
I mean, so actually we don't have to hypothesize. Like we had so many anthrax attacks like 20 years ago, right? Like so
Smallpox. I said smallpox, not
right.
anthrax.
So I mean, so if the question is, if an individual who was able to make anthrax 20 years ago can now, using an LLM, make smallpox like 2 years from now, I guess that might actually be true today if we do a well enough job of fine-tuning these language models.
Yeah, but so
Okay.
you think the models like could have information that is sort of harmful more than just like anything that they trained on all of Wikipedia. Like you think like differentially, the model will like give you a much stronger, potent attacker in some sense.
I mean, so I don't know about potent, because again, like I continue to think that the best line of defense against biorisks is at all of these failed.
Sure, but again, let's put that aside.
Yeah.
But like again, like let's sort of the world has not adapted. We'd like sort of drop in a language model that is like trained very well to be very intelligent in some sense. Do you think that this model has a harmful capability?
Like as of today, like for
Today.
today's defenses, I
Today's
think not.
defenses.
But with no defenses in Ryan's view, I think yes.
Sorry, do you think that, suppose that I right now talked to some like synth bio experts and wanted to go manufacture smallpox, do you think that the current DNA synthesis defenses would prevent me from manufacturing smallpox? I thought it was like no way in hell if I was slightly careful.
I'm not actually sure, but I would bet against it. Like I think
Okay, my understanding is there's been multiple demonstrations of just like splitting the genome into multiple parts. You're like a little bit tricky. You find like the derpiest providers, and it basically just always works. That was my understanding. It's very easy.
This
but
is, okay, I actually don't know the answer to this,
Yeah.
but this we can just like refute afterwards. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So let's like, I guess your view is probably pretty clear that like these models are going to possess dangerous capabilities that like are beyond the levels of humans. Yes.
Yes, I mean, in some sense they already do. There'll be more of that in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, I expect probably. I'm not super confident, but I would guess like bio-uplift trials for like, can you make influenza given access to DNA synthesis machines? The uplift goes up is like pretty high in 2 years or whatever.
I think I wonder if this gets back to the thing about about timelines and stuff. Like Sayash, when I hear you describe like hardening the world and building up immune systems and market forces and so forth, my reaction is often one of incredulity, but perhaps that's because I'm imagining a very like just a couple years sort of thing. And if you're imagining a couple decades, then yeah, I agree. Like there's time for humanity to like have a few disasters and then recover from them and then harden against them and so forth. Um, but it sounded like you were saying that actually things are moving fast and that like 2 years from now, like the world will be more hardened against bioterror than it is today to an extent that's kept up with the degree to which the models are getting better. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, in some sense, we already see like the regulation and the regulatory environment sort of playing this out. So I think we have in the AI action plan, for example, like certain defenses on the DNA synthesis of the type that Ryan describes. And I think we are on track to sort of definitely shore up the biodefense capabilities that we have right now over the next 2, maybe 5 years, more like more realistically. And I mean, yeah, and to the extent that like we have developed some robustness to like bioattacks or chemical attacks for the last 20 years, I think those defenses sort of continue to hold on. We show things up. Maybe there are some demonstrations of people doing really harmful stuff that sort of feed back into it. Um, but yeah, like broadly speaking, I think this sort of offense defense balance continues to hold with some effort from like lots of people. But I think we're on track.
Yeah, my expectation for what it's worth is I don't expect to see mass bioterror prior to full automation of AR&D, but I'm also not hugely surprised if it happens, and I think it's pretty likely that it will be like the models, if unsafeguarded, would make that capable, and reasonable chance there are open source models which also make it possible, but just like there aren't that many bioterrorists, I don't know, the bioterrorists are kind of derpy, but if there were competent bioterrorists, we'd just be like totally cooked.
I agree that I don't expect there to be bioterror in the next 2 years. I wouldn't be totally surprised if it was. Maybe one thing I would be surprised by is if we like find out that like 10 different terrorist groups tried to make crazy bioweapons, but were stopped at various points in the chain. Um, I feel like that would surprise me because I feel like probably just like no one's going to really try that seriously. And
Maybe we'll switch
Yeah.
away from bio for a minute into security. So so bio's a little weird because like the goal of the attacker has to be like just like wanting to cause mass havoc. Security is financially motivated. Like there are lots of people in the world today who want to steal billions of dollars and regularly try to do this. So I think one of the things that that you write is I think you say explicitly something about this being obviously defense balanced, where you say, we have every reason to believe defenders will have the advantage, even as automated bug detection methods will continue to improve. You're pretty confident that just following the natural course of things, like defenders will win both in short term and long term.
Yes, exactly. And like that is not to say that we won't have any cyber attacks. Like we've already seen examples of cyber attacks occurring. And I think what this really means is like you won't have cyber attacks that sort of upset the balance of power or whatever. We'll have them occurring as like the rate we
The
had, the
regular-
rate we had
Sure.
previously.
So
on.
if in 3 years or something there was like a significant uplift in like the number of really bad sort of cyber attacks, like this would be like very surprising to you and like you would not have expected this at all.
Exactly. Like, like, yeah.
Okay. Okay, as a security person, I disagree with this. I think, I'm very scared with what you can do with advanced stuff.
perhaps time for you to take the mic then, because I kind of agree with Sayash on this. Like,
Yeah.
paint the picture of the cyber
Okay, sure. Yeah, no, okay, so I agree in the long term that I think that, language models will give you a very nice sort of uplift in defensive capabilities where you can rewrite all of the software in Rust. And so you get rid of C entirely and you formally verify all of the things. And I think this would be nice if it were to happen. But the world today still runs on software written in the 1970s. And many of it has not been patched in like the last 15, 20 years. And I think it's like very, very likely in the near term, you will end up with very bad things happening because of attacks that were only possible at small scale previously are now possible to implement at very wide scale. Where like today, if I wanted to if anyone in this room, I wanted to sort of like know a lot about you or sort of do something really bad to one of you, I would succeed. But like I could only pick one of you. And that's why we're safe. But like in the near future, I imagine a world where like I can exercise the same level of power going towards every single person at the same time. Like, okay, so as an example, I do not fall for phishing attacks as a general rule. I get them all the time. Like I get all the time, like, please wire money to this thing or whatever. Like, I'm a Nigerian prince, right? Like I've never fallen to one of these. I would immediately fall to a spear phishing attack of the following form. Hello, Nicholas. I read your 2023 paper. I had some questions on it on section 2. Can you answer them for me? Okay, here's the answer. Great. Thank you for that clarification. I tried to run this, but I couldn't quite reproduce. Could you, what about this? Okay, answer. Fine. Okay, here's the Python script that I wrote. I can't reproduce your experiments. I'm going to go public saying that you sort of did bad science. Like really sort of like, you need to tell me what's going on. I don't know, 50-50 odds that I just like start running their experiments. Like I would just, but like, and I rely on the fact that like no one wants this enough from me. Then like, for everyone else in this room, there is something that you would respond to if like someone really tried to like, this is what spear phishing is. It's really effective, but like it requires an equally intelligent, motivated adversary. And they're like, are not an equal number of humans in the world who are malicious. But like I potentially am worried about the ability of language models to automate these kinds of attacks, and others like it. And so I think, in the short term, I am like very, very scared about these language models to be able to cause this kind of harm.
That's updating me. I was going to reply with something like, before the hackers can get the open source model to help them do these types of hacks at scale, OpenAI, Anthropic, etc., will have a service that enterprise can buy, which basically uses their API models, which are smarter and cheaper, to attack you, to like red team all of your
I think
systems.
there's some things in the world that are like much harder to defend.
Like human factors, like spear phishing, also old code.
So let's just give an example which I thought would have played out in the same way as this, but did not. So this was like the audio-based deepfake scams. Like I think we've been hearing about them quite a bit, and scams for especially senior citizens. And there was a lot of news reporting on like, people getting messages in the voices of their children, that, their kids have been kidnapped and so on. And this was something I actually genuinely thought would have the effects that you just talked about. Like you would see like en masse senior citizens getting scammed. So when this reporting started coming out, I went back and looked at the FCC database of how much sort of scams, how many scams are happening, what is the dollar value of these, and so on. And if you look at it for the last couple of years, or like maybe in the last 3 to 5 years, it's basically been constant. But there's like a small uptick here and there, but I don't think we can attribute any of this to like voice-based deepfakes.
Yeah,
I expect like the first time something like this happens, like maybe it happens to you or another prominent person, it'll be a big deal. There'll be like a New York Times article about it. And that will be like this defense mechanism. And so that will prevent sort of this happening to like the millions of people at scale at the same way.
Sure, yeah, and to be clear, like I don't think it's just the phishing thing. I think like there's a lot of software in the world that like has never been updated. That like there are thousands of IoT devices that like no security person has ever looked at because there were 1,000 of them sold in total, and like just not worth my time. Like it's like I, as any security person, will only look at things that have had 1 million units sold, because like just like that's the threshold. But like things that like are fairly unpopular, no one has ever studied. I'm sure they have 1 million bugs. A language model might just be able to find all the bugs and exploit them. And like many of these things don't have patching ways. Like I don't know this. Okay, so let's move away from this, because I don't want to spend too much time on my things. But
for reference, my view is somewhere in between. I guess I expect somewhat higher cyber attack rates, but I don't expect it to make a massive difference. But some chance it makes a massive.
Yeah, I know. I hope it does not, and I think it probably doesn't. But like I think this is one of my lingering concerns, that like it potentially will have like sort of
I think we should. Yeah, I think we should probably talk about like acceleration to AI R&D before full automation. I think that was one area where we maybe actually do disagree, and I can like name things that I expect to happen in like 1 or 2 years that you disagree with. Yeah, should we do that, or?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. So I'm like, here is a prediction for 2 years from now. I think AI R&D will be maybe like 50-50 that it's 20% faster. And that'll be driven by AI's heavily automating engineering. Engineering goes much faster. Engineering is obviously only one component driving AI progress, but like it is, a substantial component of labor. And that will just allow people to do much more. When I say this, I'm not including stuff like data generation. I mean, like AI is doing things that humans would have otherwise done.
20% is a small enough number that it might be hard to measure. Do you have a metric in mind?
I do not think this will be easy to measure. I think we'll be disputing it at the time in the same way that we're disputing the current rate. But I just like, it is at least a disagreement, even if it's hard to measure.
And like this is the overall pace of AI R&D progress, like how quickly we get from GPT-5 to GPT-6.
Yeah, I was saying specifically R&D, not including scaling. If we do, maybe if we do overall AI progress, maybe it's like 10% or something, or maybe like 15%. It's like a little lower, but I don't think it's a huge difference.
Would you say the meter trend will be like 15% steeper 2
Yeah,
years from now?
meter trend will be 15% steeper to this effect. 2 years from now, maybe more, but I'm like that's like.
Meter might be hard to test or something, but like
Yeah,
something like a meter test that was.
I mean, you won't be
done.
able to measure it because like there'll be so many other factors driving it faster or slower.
You
right?
can back test things on previous models though, right? Like you can construct.
Yeah. So I
In
mean,
2028, we can construct a new test set that we go backwards and we test all the models. And you expect a steeper trend.
yeah, sure. I mean,
And
like
you expect it to plateau more.
Not really. Like the benchmark, I don't think will plateau anytime soon. Like the benchmark.
Okay, the thing, a nice disagreement, I think, is so you have a very clear distinction between tasks and what's the other thing you call it?
Like the general skills that
Sure.
allow humans to solve.
Yeah, the skills and the tasks. Whereas my impression is that you're both on the benchmarks capture roughly the right kind of thing. And it's not actually perfect, of course, obviously, but when we saturate the benchmarks, a real thing has been done. Whereas you're potentially more of course it's a test set, you can make the models good at the test set.
Yeah. I mean, I do still think there's some signal. Like I spend a lot of time benchmarking for that reason, but I think like by and large, I don't think that translates to the real world.
Okay, and to be clear, this is not just because the labs necessarily will optimize for that in particular. You think even back testing, if we took a model today, built a new benchmark today and back tested only on models that had been released previously, you expect to see a very steep rate of there's been much progress, but you think that this progress is in some sense decorrelated with the ability to actually do the real skill.
Exactly.
I definitely, I don't really agree with that. It seems to me like there's
Argue the case.
Yeah, so from what I've seen, there's like a pretty good relationship between like AI's ability to complete diverse, not necessarily very overfit to software engineering agentic tasks and ability to complete sort of small, reasonably self-contained tasks in the wild that actually occur in people's work. And then there's some question of how much can AIs assist with not very well self-contained tasks, right? So for example, when Meter's task suite is for example, a 2-hour task in that is a task that takes a human from having no context to completing it in 2 hours. And actually not that high a fraction of tasks in the world have this property, but some do. Some tasks actually do. And I think that for real world tasks that actually do have the property that you could get a smart human software engineer and they could complete it in 2 hours without any context beyond general context, I think the AIs are not much worse than Meter task suite would let you believe. Do you agree with that?
I mean, sure, but I guess the difference is in the distribution of tasks that actually matter in the real world.
Okay, fine. Maybe this is the problem with existing benchmarks. Let's imagine I do the following experiment. I'm going to take the current models as they exist today. I'm going to wait a year. I'm going to then take all of the math proofs that appear in next year's some math journal, and I will ask the models to prove those statements. That clearly was a thing that actual mathematicians did. If I took this as a benchmark and the numbers were going up, would you still dispute that this was measuring the skill?
Like the skill that mathematicians had their jobs?
Yeah,
So, I mean, it is measuring something. It is measuring something that would have made mathematicians more productive, for sure.
Okay.
And I think AI tools will continue to make mathematicians more productive at certain parts of their jobs. And at the same time, I think mathematicians do a lot more than generating proofs, right? And so I think
some of them just do proof statements though, right? There exist mathematicians who just go find statements and try to prove them.
Yes.
I mean, yes and no, because that's again, I think that's a limitation of how we conceive of their tasks. They still go to seminars, they try to absorb knowledge, they try to figure out.
No, but I'm saying there are some mathematicians who measure their output in terms of how many things that they succeeded in proving from some known distribution of things to prove. I'm not saying that's what the only thing mathematicians do. Sometimes they find new statements to try to prove. And obviously in the work of proving things, they find new concepts which are useful in general. But I'm sometimes mathematicians, you can measure their output by did they prove some stuff,
Yeah, and similarly, we can measure the output of scientists by did they write or how many papers they wrote. And I
No,
think
but
that's a measure of
proofs are
scientific progress.
no, but it's which statements they prove. I feel it's how many papers they wrote is analogous to how many statements they prove. And you can always find increasingly dumb statements to prove. In the same way you can find increasingly dumb papers to submit to NeurIPS. And but we could also measure, scientists' progress by how much more capable they made AIs on some downstream domain. And I think that's more analogous to the proofs, right? It's or how much more revenue they made would be more, I would say.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the distinction between what is the cleanest, why is it not the case that I can't construct a benchmark which actually measured the thing that the real person did, right? Is it impossible, or is it just that you think what has not been created?
If you have a ready answer, then go for it. Otherwise, I was going to try to intervene.
No, I mean, look, we can come up with benchmarks that are much more close to what we might consider to be realistic tasks, right? But at the same time, we also have to sort of consider these tasks, the nature of these tasks changing. So, I mean, I guess like the difference between tasks and skills is to some extent goes back to what Daniel described as what it means for a human to be able to learn a new task or like execute on it and so on. And I think like maybe AI models get much better at solving like, I don't know, different types of mathematical proofs, or maybe they're much better at doing engineering tasks. And that does not still sort of port over to their skills at like learning new things more quickly. I guess that's one way of putting it. Like they're not becoming more sample efficient when they're becoming better at the meter task framework, or they are not becoming more reliable. You can't trust their outputs more. You don't have like those 5 nines of reliability, even as you get better and better at any of these underlying metrics.
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely disagree with the claim that the AIs aren't getting more reliable and there aren't things like, for example, there are definitely things where previously I would have been like the AIs are unlikely to succeed, or the AIs, might succeed, but I really need to check their work carefully. And I would just be like, yeah, obviously it'll be fine. And like this increasingly happens over time to a broader distribution of things. And like, obviously like it's not, it's like there's some expansion rate in terms of this like, yeah, the set of things where you can just like use that. And I don't think I think that is growing. Do you disagree?
I mean, yeah, or maybe I would say like it's almost orthogonally growing. And if we enter certain types of environments, so for example, if we start like RL training these models quite heavily, we actually see this diverge as well. So far we have seen evidence of this growing. But then once you have like models that are RL'd on, for example, we did some experiments with weak unit tests for coding. So instead of having like 200 unit tests to test whether the model does something well, you have just 5. They're leaky. They often have false positives. The models actually become worse at solving that task than better. Does that make sense?
Sure, but I'm like, my guess is that there will exist tasks where models are extremely reliable and there's just some expanding set, which is like a multiplier off of the tasks where they can do 50%. Like there's like tasks they can complete 50% of the time, tasks they can complete 80% of the time, and tasks they can complete more reliably than humans. And I'm like, there's just like that distribution. I'm not sure. Yeah. Do you disagree that there are tasks which there's an expanding set of tasks which the AIs are more reliable on than humans?
I mean, I guess there are like expanding sets of tasks, but maybe like benchmarks don't really measure it.
Is it that the benchmarks can't, or that they don't currently?
They don't currently. I want to build benchmarks that can, but I think it's really hard.
Okay, I'm going to start taking some questions. There's one question there that people want. We
gotta get you a mic. Can I borrow one up here?
I'd love to hear from Sayash about what are the real world constraints. I mean, let's just assume that you guys are right and that, the AI gets so much better. A good example, Waymo, they're in San Francisco. Why aren't they everywhere yet? That's an example of the real world normal technology constraints model. There are physical, legal, social adoption issues that stand in the way. So even if you had these, perfect humans in the cloud, well, would we have enough data center capacity? Would we have enough chips? Would we have enough power? Would companies have enough, ability to sort of adopt them into their workflows? So I guess could you I kind of haven't heard enough of like, could we document kind of just like what are the categories of barriers that you guys think about?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I would sort of boil them down to institutional like barriers. So, for example, even if we have AI systems that are very good at giving legal advice, technically it would constitute unfair legal practice, things like that. We have constraints on experimentation. So there are many experiments, the many types of knowledge that we might want to get from real world experiments that we wouldn't and perhaps shouldn't allow AI systems to run. And then we have things of the sort where like we traditionally talk about like real world compute and infrastructure, which wouldn't allow us to sort of scale past like certain sort of inherent limits. I think there might be many others. So for example, like human taste-based preferences, but I think like to start with, these are 3 examples of limits.
Yeah, so okay, I want to be clear. My view is that things go very fast not because you have a small number of humans in the cloud. It's because shortly after you have a small number of humans in the cloud, you have a vast number of vastly superhuman AIs running extremely fast in the cloud. And so I'm like, it's like you have 1 trillion AIs, each running at 100x speed, that are way smarter than humans pretty quickly, and then those can boot.
A trillion
How are they
feels
being
like
powered?
much. We have these numbers in the sliding scale on AI 2027.
Well,
I'd say more like 300,000, maybe 1 million.
for ASI?
I mean, we had these numbers on there. I don't think they ever got to 1 trillion.
Okay, well,
I basically agree with you. Like huge numbers. But again, the numbers matter less than the serial speed up, which is even
Yeah.
bigger deal,
Yeah, sure.
and the quality.
So thanks for the debate. This
Yeah.
is great. Thank you. It's very enlightening. But I guess that after the debate, you didn't change your minds. And there are still people who are not convinced one way or the other. And so my question is about like epistemic humility and being agnostic in the face of not being sure which trajectory, especially about timeline, which seems the main, and the reasons for that. So what do we do with that? And it seems to me we have to apply the precautionary principle and say, okay, so these are possible futures in terms of decision making, whether you're a government or something else. How do I, avoid even the 1% case or the 10% case that is really bad for me?
So, I mean, like, I'm not sure if you were here for the previous session, but actually, I think we agree a lot more on what is to be done in some sense. Like, we agree on transparency being a mechanism, on legal safe harbors for security researchers, whistleblower protections, and so on.
And on if AIs were fully automating AI R&D and looked like human in the cloud type situation, extremely aggressive action would be warranted, right?
Exactly. Like, that's not a normal technology, I guess, right?
But
But
like before that happens, like we need to like I think the point is we would need to start hopefully doing some of these things now, like like
Preparing for
so like you spend I don't know like 20 pages of your book describing how it is not going to be the case that takeoff happens and we should not do that, and you say explicitly in the book that like the risk of snake oil is like much greater than the risk of takeoff, and we should work on snake oil and not the takeoff risk.
I mean, like, I guess maybe one way of putting it is I think these are the mechanisms we need to understand the scope of that risk in the first place. And I mean, actually, like in a conversation with Daniel a few months back, I think he agreed that, like, as if AI systems are at this current level of capability or like normal technology, until we see sort of early evidence of this type of takeoff happening, transparency is the main mitigation.
But yeah, so the quote in particular says we shouldn't let the bugbear of existential risk detract us from the more immediate harms of air snake oil.
Exactly. And
You believe
I
this is
guess
true?
the true statement here is like we shouldn't sort of deprioritize working on AI snake oil. Like we can do both.
But that's not what the statement is. The statement is like we shouldn't let the bugbear of existential risk distract us from the more immediate harm of AI snake oil.
I feel like you're being too harsh on him.
Okay.
Let's stop beating him up. Yeah, like so ultimately, we at AI Futures Project are trying to sketch out our vision for what actually should be done, and using the terminology of this conversation, the idea is lots of transparency and preparation and capacity building for now, so that when we get to the humans in the cloud type situation, we can do something more drastic that involves international coordination and not letting anyone do a huge super intelligence explosion immediately, and like having safeguards and blah 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 blah. So in that sense, I think we agree, or we're not advocating for like the giant international thing to happen now, and neither are you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you would
Cool.
be in favor of doing some of the preparation now?
I mean, like, depends on what the preparation looks like, obviously. Like, for example, some of the proposals a couple of years
Yeah.
ago that were very prominent were like ban open source. And I think we agree that that's not the right thing to do.
I'm not advocating for banning open source. Let me talk about the things we. So one of the things that I'm excited about is hardware-based governance tech. So R&D for tracking compute. The idea here being that like it'll be hard to have international coordination in the future if everyone is worried that everyone else is cheating, and so there has to be some way for people to verify that people aren't cheating. And right now there is such a way, but it's incredibly costly. It involves like turning off all the GPUs and sending inspectors to like go make sure they're off. And if only we had technology that was better, then you could have less costly ways of doing that sort of agreement, where like there's a device on the GPU that like will tell you if something fishy is happening on it, but otherwise that's all it does. And that way the GPU can keep running, it can keep doing what it was doing before, but like people can trust that it's not doing the wrong stuff, right? So one of the things that we probably would recommend is like there should be more R&D investment into that type of technology. I'm curious if you agree with that or not.
I mean, I think on the margin, it will be less helpful than you might suggest. Like, so for example, I'm not like a big fan of either export controls or this other type of like non-proliferation, because in some sense, the costs are quite high for something that we are still very uncertain about. And I think like this type of thing basically like enforces this, I don't know, like surveillance technology essentially on GPU chips or technology, which I think is a very concerning precedent.
I agree with
And so
that.
we should think a lot more closely with before we agree to like something like this.
Yeah, it's worth noting that the chip verification tech would be like, it would be in, the hope would be that it would be in place, and that would allow for doing future agreements between like e.g. the US and China, etc., rather than the hope being that it would be like currently used, because there isn't political will for that yet. But I think there's a question of like, what did you want to do in the future? And I don't know. I mean, yeah.
I think there's often this criticism of people that are very focused on the harms that are in the far future, like the existential risk, that you're discounting what's happening in the now in terms of AI harm. So I'm just curious, as people who are focused on the existential risk, how have you kind of incorporated what we found out this year in terms of psychological, mental health impacts on people that are using chatbots?
So I think it's an illustrative example of how, as we both agreed, the current models are not aligned and the current alignment technology is insufficient. And that's something that should be very concerning to us. I think that also, like, we should warn people about these possible negative effects happening already. And people should know about that so that they think twice, perhaps, before forming a deep relationship with their chatbot, or before like letting their teenage kid like have a ChatGPT account or whatever. Like these are things that I think people should be tracking and paying attention to. It's not my area of expertise. Like I mostly spend my time thinking about what happens in a few years rather than what's happening.
But it doesn't
Just like
change your
that.
forecast. You just assume they're going to fix that and everything else is going to stay the same.
Though it might not even fix that. It might be that like even as things are taking off with the humans in the cloud, there's still problems like this that have persisted, causing harm. I do think though that like there's like an immediate economic incentive to fix these harms in some sense, and there are people working on it. And as the AIs get smarter, they might be better at not doing that sort of thing.
Or worse.
Or worse, yeah. So, but basically, like, I wouldn't be surprised if that stuff has been fixed in a few years. I also wouldn't be surprised if it hasn't, basically. And I think it's good that people are working on it.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that this is not the far future, right? So we're talking about stuff that happens in like 5 or 10 years, and so I don't think that it's like, I don't think that we're like, I don't think we're like, oh, these things 100 years away. Like this is very immediate from my perspective and Daniel's perspective. But yeah, I guess I'd be like, it seems like there'll just be ongoing harmful effects of AI that increase proportional to the capabilities. It's just that I think the largest harmful effects are like AI takeover, coups, or like I am with some long tail. And then I think like, so I'm just like, I think it's good to focus on the largest harmful effects, or like, I don't know, like, importance multiplied by tractability or whatever.
I mean, maybe I can just quickly respond to this. So I guess like to respond to your specific question about like the distraction argument. So I think in some sense, we have written it incorrectly. I mean, we were wrong about saying that one type of harm distracts us from another. Although I guess what we were going for there was we shouldn't just focus on the risk from like these long-term things. And it's great that people think about it, but I think we should have a similar sort of response to things that we can see. And in some sense, like the reason I'm wrong, or like the reason I think this is incorrect, is because actually what we've seen from the last few years is that working on these present day harms is not in conflict with like working on like thinking about what happens when AI capabilities become better. In some sense, we have exercised the muscles of like political will. We figured out how to sort of get regulation passed, or like we've learned from mistakes where regulation hasn't been passed, and that will sort of continue to be beneficial.
So I gave a talk at the Curve last year. I made exactly that argument. I think, yeah. Would you agree with this roughly? Yeah. Okay. I think
There's some transfer.
Yeah,
The
between-
transfer is not arbitrary.
and we should work on both.
Like roughly, it's like a little complicated. Like if any given person, I
Oh,
would
it's not,
recommend-
it's not complicated. Yes. Okay. Last question, and then we have to stop.
This is a question motivated in part by what Joshua just said. So there's surely more than 1,000 presentations or classes that have started in the past 6 months that put each of your respective papers on, the second slide and say, really smart people with deep technical expertise have significant disagreements. And we in the class or you in the audience are unlikely to resolve them on your own. And then someone puts up a second slide that says, and another really smart person like Joshua says, well, in the face of this radical uncertainty, we should invoke the precautionary principle. And he's on one side. And then Mark Andreessen is on the other slide. And it says the precautionary principle is for, a push of Europeans. And that's why they have no decent tech companies. So we have technical deep uncertainty and, value disagreement on policy. What should the third slide say?
this might be a point for me to mention the thing that I was trying to say earlier. It seems to me like it would be great if there was evidence that we could go looking for prior to the point of AI R&D automation that would, help arbitrate this dispute. Because the thing that I'm unfortunately very scared of is that we might be in a situation where, the year is 2027, the year is 2029, whatever. I'm freaking out because my friends at the companies are being like, yeah, it's basically fully automated now. Holy shit, it's going so fast. But the rest of the world is not freaking out, and Sayash in particular is not freaking out, saying, "Oh, still, we don't know that it doesn't. It's probably not human in the cloud yet, or whatever." By the time we find out that it really is, like these are like humans in the cloud, well, maybe it's a couple months later, and they've already become superhuman, right? So what I would love is if there was evidence that would like arbitrate this dispute, at least to some extent, prior to the point where it's just like actually happening. They actually are humans in the cloud, And I suggest, and I'm curious what you think about. I suggest that maybe the online learning and data efficiency things are the things to track here. And I'm curious if you agree and if you want to add any other things to the list. Like
30 seconds, and then we have to stop.
So sorry, can I start with the response to Rob's question as well?
Very quickly.
Yeah. So I mean, like I think what should be on the third slide is this like long list of things that most or if not all experts basically agree on. Like we spend the first hour talking about like all of these policy mitigations, all of the things we should be prepared about. I mean, fundamentally, like AI as normal technology agrees that like AI is about as big as or perhaps will be bigger than the internet. And so, like there is substantial common ground. And the fact that we still haven't been able to sort of codify that or use that for setting reasonable policy making should be what is top of mind for most people is like, even when we agree on so many different things, we can't pass basic common sense laws. And that is kind of terrifying. So I guess like in some sense, like the sort of specific thing we need to do in the world, like to me is like pretty clear.
I agree also with
Yeah. Okay. So yes, we're now over time. Thank you, and let's thank the panelists one more time.